Okay, so let's talk about the object-oriented programming concepts today. Now comes the question, what is an object? Why we use this kind of objects and all we require it? Okay, remember, anything that you see around us, it's only basically an object. For example, you see an AC, you're seeing a light, you see a notebook, you're saying it, or you see a pen, a marker, whatever you call it as, or human being yourself, it's what it's an object is all about. Okay, so anything that you see around us, or yourself being yourself, or your mobile, or whatever it is, it's said to be an object. But generally, when you talk about the object, in Telugu, it gives a different meaning for you. But in English, it's a thing, something which has a life and which doesn't have a life. So both is said to be what? It's an object for us. Now, when you say object, okay, let us say, for example, we'll take one beautiful example. We'll take what you call a cat. Or let us say that I'm having an example of a dog. Okay, some animal I'm taking it as an example. So there is an object. So when you talk about this particular object, so this object will have something in it. And now comes the question, why should I write, we are going to have the concept called object-oriented programming concept, why we are going to have it. The basic reason for having the object-oriented programming is, as I said you that, so is it my voice is clear to everybody? Okay, so why we have to write this object-oriented programming? What is this object-oriented programming means? Object-oriented programming is a concept where we are going to write an application for the real life. So whatever we are going to have it in real life, it's the same thing. Like as I said you that, so anything that we see around is basically an object. Now when I want to write a program for the object, so I need to have a kind of methodology of programming, or the way of programming is going to be an object-oriented. We'll discuss that what is this object-oriented. Again, we'll be talking about that as we are proceeding, we'll be talking about the same thing. So let's not worry much about it. So I'll explain you what all these things all mean for us. Okay, so when you say this, as I said you that the object-oriented programming concept is one which is going to give me the real-time programming. So whatever we have it in our real life, so for that, when you want to write a program, I need to have this style of programming, what you call object-oriented programming for us. Now, remember, when you talk about this object-oriented programming, this is the kind of style, or this is the style of programming that we are using it in our software now. Okay, any modern programming language you take, so it has the object-oriented programming only. Okay, so we don't have like there is, if you talk about the earlier programming languages like C, so there we have a style of programming what you call procedure-oriented. Now we are not going to talk about the procedure-oriented. We talk about only the object-oriented, because as I said that it is for the real time. So in the real life, whatever we see, there are objects only. When I want to write a program for the objects, I need to have this style of programming, what you call object-oriented programming, will be better for us. Okay. So we'll discuss this. Okay. Now, so what is this object for? As I told you that object is the core, or it is the base for my object-oriented programming. Now, when you talk about this object, so as I told you that object is one which represents the thing in the real life, or what you call the entity. So I'm having some entities are going to be there. So that which is going to be the, whatever the entities are there. So those entities are going to be represented using the objects for us. Okay. And remember, when you talk about this object, okay, let us talk about the cat there. So when I talk about the cat, so cat has something what you call it as the characteristics will be there, or what you call the data will be there, and it has some kind of behavior will be there. Now, so anything, as I told you that, we'll take one example. So let us say that you are having an animal called a cat you talk about. So this is what, it's an object for me, right? This is an object. So when I talk about this one, okay, before I talk about this one, let us take one more example. I'll take student. Student is what? It is an object for me. Student is an object. Cat is an object. Okay. fan, okay, mobile, whatever it is, these are all going to be what? Basically the objects. Now, when I want to write a program for a cat, let us say that you want to write a program for a cat, or you want to write a program for a student you want to write. Then, so what will be there for me? For a cat, it will have certain data will be there. Okay, or you talk about a student, some data will be there for the student. Right? You understand what I'm telling here? So it will have some data will be there. So when you say the data for the cat, what data will be there? Now you may be putting some, you'll be having some name for the cat. You have some name. So if it's a pet animal, you'll have a name for it. Then, okay, it'll have some height. So what is the height of that particular cat? Or what is the weight of that particular cat? Okay, or what is the age of that particular cat? Or what is the color of the cat? Okay, so you'll have so many things, right? This is what you call the data. When I talk about a student, so what is the data for a student there? Student ID, name of the student. So what is the age of the student? Okay, what is the class he is studying? Okay, what are the marks of the student? Right? So these are what? The data. Okay. Let us say that you talk about an object called employee. What will be there? So what will be there for this? ID will be there. Maybe you call it employee ID, employee number, anything else you call it as. Name of the employee. You talk about the salary of the employee. So what is the department he is working? Okay. What is this role? Okay. What is the role of the employee? Right? Or you call it a designation. What is the designation of the employee? All these different things is what? It is the data. Okay. Now, when we talk about these objects, they not only have what you call the data, but they also have what you call some kind of behaviors. They have some kind of behavior. When we talk about this object called a cat, so what behavior it is going to be there? It has a behavior like it is going to have the eating, okay, sleeping, okay, maybe jumping, all these different types of behaviors. Now, when you talk about this student, you may tell, sir, student also is going to have the same behavior. No, we'll not talk about that thing there. So generally what we do is, what kind of behaviors that we define? Behaviors are nothing but the actions. So what is the kind of action that we define is, what data you are defining for the object. Based upon the data, you define the behaviors. Right? Based upon the data, you define the behavior. What actions you are performing on that particular data that we define generally. Understood? When we talk about the behaviors or what you call the actions here, okay, we define the actions, okay, which we are going to do on the data. So we are having some data is there. On that data, what actions you are going to perform only, we'll be writing it as a part of the behavior or as a part of the actions. Understood? When you are writing the actions, when you are defining the actions for the object, you define the actions on the data. So for a cat means, okay, we have taken some simple example, you have taken sleeping like that. But for the objects, we will not write code like that. So we'll be writing the code based upon the data what you are defining inside it. Similarly, first employee also will write the same thing. Okay. So you want, generally when you say this, what actions will be writing it? Generally, when I talk about the actions, okay, like for example, reading the data, okay, reading the data, right? For example, I'm doing some calculations, I'm going to do it. So when you say some calculations like maybe your payroll or what you call a pay slip calculations, you're doing it. You understand? We are writing some pay slip calculations and all. Okay, for example, when you talk about a student, you talk about what are the data that you, what are the actions you talk about. For example, result calculations. Okay, I want to do the result calculation. Okay, I want to read the marks. Okay, I want to have some promotions from first year, he's going to be promoted to second year, like that. So all these things, actions will be defining for that particular object. Depending upon the data, what is there inside my class, okay, sorry, inside my object, I'll be defining certain actions, I'll be defining it. The actions generally we define is related to the data what is we are defining inside the class, right? Understood? For a cat also you can have the same thing. What? Reading the data, okay, doing some calculations. Okay, let's say you want to write the code for move. When you say move, what the cat will do? It will move. It will start walking. Okay, instead of saying walk, move, we'll say walk. So when you say walk, the cat should walk for me, like that. The actions will define there. Understood? Any questions? So any questions there? Okay, let's go back to this one. Now, what we are talking about? Now we are taking an example object called cashier object. I'm having an object called the cashier. So when I talk about this object called cashier, what will be the name will be there? What is the designation? What is the age? What is the weight of that cashier? Okay. Generally, these data, we also call it as the state of the object, we call it as. We also call it as a state. Okay, state. Or we call them as attributes. So different words will be using it to represent the data for us. You call it as a data, you call it as a state, you call it as attributes, you call it as a fields. Okay, different names you're going to use it. Understood what I'm telling here? So when you call about this data, so you also call it as attribute. Okay, you also call it as fields. You can also call it as state of the object, fields of the object, attributes of the object, data of the object. Okay, like that. Okay. Now we have the actions there. So actions is nothing but the behavior part. The actions are nothing but the behavior. Okay. Generally, as I said you that we'll be defining the actions on the data, right? For example, we talk about your cashier. So cashier is going to do what? He's going to collect the money. Okay. He prepares the bills and he's going to generate the bill. He gives a print of the bill for you. Like that is the actions. Okay. When you have the customer, the same thing, customer will have the different action will be having it. So he picks the products from the supermarket and then he gives it to the cash counter. So in the cash counter, they'll be making a bill and they'll give him. So he picks up the products and he leaves the counter. Before he leaves it, he's going to make a payment to the in the counter and then he leaves it. Okay, those are the different types of actions you are going to define. So for depending upon what kind of object you are going to define it, the actions will be different for me. Understood here? Okay. One second. Okay. Now, when I say the object, so if you say this is the object, okay, in this object, I'm going to have two things for me. So what are the two things that are there for me in my object? So one is the data will be there. Okay, this is what you call, either you call it as the data or you call it as attributes or you call it as the state. Okay, something like that. So that will be there for me for the object. Not only that, what will be there for me? In addition to this data and all this, I have the behavior. I have the behavior. Okay. So, or what you call it, the actions. Right. So these two combine together. So object consists of data and behavior, or data and the actions are going to be there for me. Understood? So as I told you that, so in case of your dog, or you talk about your cat, or you talk about the cashier, or you can talk about the customer, all these things are what? They'll have their own data will be there and they have their own behavior will be there, the actions. Both these two put together, it's going to be my object it is. Okay. That means when you talk about the entity called the cat, or when you talk about the entity called the cashier, so the cashier entity will have attributes will be there and certain actions will be there. So any entity that you talk about, so that entity will have, so one is called, so the entity will have something what you call it as characteristics, and so we'll have the behavior will be there. Okay. So we said that whenever you talk about the object has the data and it has this some kind of actions are going to be there. That is, when you talk about the any entity that you talk about, okay, the entity will have the data will be there and some and some actions will be there. Now we have another concept, what you call message passing. Message passing is a concept where we use this. Let's say you want to talk to an object. So whenever you want to talk to an object or the data has to be passed from one object to another object, we use a concept called message passing. Message passing is a concept which we use for communication between the objects. Okay. So let us say that I'm having two cats are there. Okay. Cat A and cat B is there. So they want to have a communication. Okay, so when you talk about programming part, so I'll be using some methods. I'll be invoking the object B will be invoking the object A data it is going to invoke. So when I want to invoke it, I'll be using some message and some method. I'll be using it so that it's going to have the communication between these two objects. So message passing is a concept which we use it for the communication between the multiple objects for us. Okay. So as I said, message passing is a concept which is used for communicating between one object and the another object for us. Now comes a question, we have something what I call a class. Now what is this class for us? Now what is this class for us? Now remember we said in real time, or what you call the in the real time, or what you call in the real world, we said what we have the objects are going to be there, but we didn't talk about the classes. Now comes the question, what is this class, how this class is getting related for us for the objects for us. Now when I talk about these classes, now let us say that you have the different objects are there. Like for example, I'm having the object like, so let us say I'm having the different objects we'll talk about. So now let us say that you're having an objects like cat, okay, rat, bat, okay. Let me use one more, a bigger element, bigger animal I talk about. Elephant is there. Okay. So these are the objects which are related for me. Now how they are related? Any idea? So how they are related? Cat, rat, elephant, they're all related together. They're animals. Very good. Basically, they're all animals. Okay. That so animals is what? It's a broader classification of things. It's a broad class of data for us. Okay. So we say animals is what? It's a very broad. So many different types of animals are coming. But these animals that are what I'm talking about, they have something in common. Okay. So let me talk about another set of objects that we have. So another set of objects I'll talk about. Now let us say you're having hen is there. Okay. So peacock is there. Hen and peacock is there. So these two are common. These are also animals only, but there is something common between these two. Okay, I'll take another object. So I will take another object. So for example, I'm having a table is there, a chair is there, okay, cot is there. These are something in this. There is something common between these. Yes. Non-living things. Very good. This is called furniture. It is called, right? This is called furniture. I understand these are the non-living things. It's a very broad classification it is. So when I narrow down the classification, it is a furniture. Okay, if I ask you show the furniture, okay, let us say that you're taking me to your home now, and I ask you show the furniture. What will show me? You'll show what? Table, cot, chair, okay, sofa you'll show. All these things will show. If I ask you, where is the furniture? Then I ask you, where is the furniture? Then you'll ask me, sir, what is the question, sir? Just now I showed you the furniture. Table, cot, and all I showed you, no, that is only furniture. So if I ask you, where is the furniture? Furniture does not exist. What exists? You understand what I'm telling? Furniture does not exist. Furniture is only a class. It is something which is common, which is a few things which are having common in nature that you call it as furniture. Understand what I'm telling? Furniture exists in the form of table. Understood? That's what it is. When I ask you furniture, you'll show me the table, you'll show me the cot, you'll show me the chair. Furniture exists in the form of object. Class is
object is existing in the home, but it's not existing in the in my in living to the where I am living.
Class is only my imagination. Class is only what? I'm putting some things together and I'm calling it as a class. That is furniture. Furniture is the class. Object is which exists in the reality. Able to understand? You understand what I'm telling? Able to understand? Class which is only what? A concept. It's a conceptual thing. It's only an imaginary thing. Okay? Class is only some conceptual thing. It's an imaginary thing which you think that it is there. Okay? But object is something which you see, which exists. Object is something which exists for me. Understand what I said? Clear there? Now, fine. These are the animals, but they are mammals. Okay? They are the mammals. These are all birds. They are birds. Okay, they have what is common in them? They lay the eggs. Right? So for mammals, what is common? They give birth to the baby. They give birth to the baby. Right? Understood? Now, how do I define this? So when I say the class is something a blueprint, or it is only concept, a conceptual thing. Okay, it's only my conceptual thing which does not exist in reality. What is a class there? Class, it's a group of objects which are having similar behavior for me, right? It's a group of objects having similar behavior. Understood? Class is something which is having common behavior. Okay. Object, what is this object now for me? Object is something which exists in reality. Okay. Object is something which exists for me in the reality. Okay. If I ask you the furniture, it will show me the cart. So when I ask you again furniture, it will show me that cart. Either it will show me the cart or chair or table will show me. Understood? So your object is one which occupies the memory. We'll talk about that programming part. You understand what is a class and what is an object. Right. Now when you talk about the programming part, we'll discuss the programming. So when you talk about the classes, we have a class of cars are there, class of animals is going to be there. Okay, like that. Some set of objects which are having common behavior that you're going to put them into one class. Understood? Any questions? Okay. So we'll talk about this. We'll get back to this. Now, we said that object or something which is going to have some data is going to be there, and we have some kind of behavior is going to be there, or what you call the actions. Now, if you want to have them, now let us say that I want to write a program for the object. Okay, I want to write a program for the object. So how I'm going to write it? Understand what I'm telling? I want to write a program for the object. We said what? The first thing is the object consists of data. Now comes a question, how do you store the data? I want to store the data. What you will do? Okay, right. We'll discuss. Previously, we'll go back. Now, previously, I wanted to store the student data. What we did? I want to write a program for storing the student data. Let's say marks I wanted to store. Then what we did? We declared some variables we declared, right? So whenever you want to store the data, you have declared some variables. Understand what I said? We are going to declare some variables. We are going to declare it for the data part. Okay. So what about this? You want to do some kind of actions, you want to do it. You want to do some kind of calculations, you want to do it. We used to define the methods. we define the methods. Able to understand what I'm telling you? See, whenever you talk about them, okay, in the programming concept, sorry. See, when you talk about the programming, so when you want to have some data is going to be there, we use variables. When you want to define some actions or some kind of behavior you want to have it, we use methods. Okay, so that means object, when I want to define the object in my programming, I'm talking about the programming now, I'm not talking about the conceptual thing. I want to write a program for an object. What is required for me? I want to write a program for the object. How do you write the program for the object? Yes. So the objects which I'm going to have. So we said what? In programming. So now we are talking about the programming concept. So if I want to have an object now in my programming, so I need to have variables. We use variables for data storage. Okay. And we use methods for the actions. Actions are behavior. Clear what I'm telling? Any questions? When you say the object in reality, so it consists of some data or some attributes, some state it consists, and it has some behavior will be there. When I talk about programming, in programming, when I want to define this data, if I want to define, I need to have some variable has to be there. Okay. And when I'm defining the methods, sorry, I'm defining the behaviors or some calculations I want to do. For that, I need to have some methods has to be defined in my object. Clear? Any questions? So anything that you're not able to understand, you can ask me. No problem there. Okay. Now, we said what? Whenever we talk about the object, we talk about the classes. First, we talk about the class. From the class, we are going to get the object. We said what? Class is something which defines a set of objects which are having common behavior is going to be there. I'm having common behavior for set of objects that we call it as one class. Now, let us talk about programming only, more about programming. Now, I want to define a class now. Okay, I want to define a class. So what is the syntax that we follow? Class followed with the class name. We define the class name, open the flower braces, then, so inside the class, you define the members of the class. We define the members of the class, we'll be defining. When you say the members, what are the members of my class means? So here we will be defining the variables and methods. Okay, we'll be defining the variables and methods will be defining. That means my class, that is my class name. Okay, my class name consists of variables. When you say variables, how you define the variables? You'll be defining the data type and the variable name you're going to define. Okay, how about the methods? How we define the methods? Return type, method name or function name, you call it as method name, open the parenthesis, parameters. Okay, flow braces, then we are writing the commands to do the actions. Okay, whatever that you want to do it, there you define the actions, then close the brace. Finally, close. Getting it what I'm telling? So when I'm going to define my class, inside the class, okay, we said what? It is an object, it is related to object. In the object, what you'll be placing? You'll be placing the variables, sorry, data and actions will have it. That means in the class, I'll be defining the variables and I'll be defining the methods from the class. Now after that one, so I want to have want to define a object. Okay, so how we define the object means we are going to create the instance of the class. We are going to create the, we say it's an instance of the class. We are going to create it. We are going to create the instance of the class. The instance of the class means it is an object. The instance, that is nothing but it's a memory allocation. Okay, how we are going to do it? So first you'll be using class name, object, some object name is equal to new class name, will be writing it. Okay, so we will be using what? The new keyword will be using it. So new is a keyword for, it's going to do the memory allocation for us. It's going to do the memory allocation for us. Okay, the time is going to end from, okay. Okay, now let us talk about the double dimension array. So what we missed yesterday's class, we are talking about, we displayed the variables, double dimension array we declared, but I didn't tell you the program. So let us see the program part. So if I want to work with the double dimension array, before I talk about that, let's have a thing for the single dimension array. So in case of the single dimension array, we'll use single loop. You are going to use it. Only one loop you are going to use it. If I'm going to talk about the double dimension array, okay, we'll be using nested loops. We'll be using it. We'll be using nested loop for reading the data from the double dimension array. So meanwhile, I'll start my Eclipse. So let the Eclipse be starting for us. Okay. Now, so yesterday we have seen the example for reading a single dimension array. For single dimension array, remember you're going to use only one simple loop. Will be using it. So if I'm going to have a double dimension array is going to be there. If I want to read the data for the double dimension array, I want to read, I will be using the nested loop. So in case of the single dimension array, so for example, let us say we declared the array like this, integer a is equal to new int of 5 elements I have defined it. Then what we did, we'll be using like this, for int some variable x is equal to 0, x less than, then it is a dot length semicolon x plus plus we used. Okay, a single dimension, single loop we are used. So if I'm going to have a double dimension array, it's going to be there. So how we declare the double dimension array? Int double box bracket, okay, some variable name, it's equal to new int of how many rows you want it and how many columns you want it. We'll be defining it. So for this one, what we'll be doing, the loop will be taking like this. I'll say, so r is equal to some integer r is equal to 0, r is less than a dot length, okay, then r plus plus, this is for the rows, right? And then inside this we'll use one more loop, we'll be using it for the columns. We said what? So the double dimension array, it is similar to the two-dimensional matrix, okay, something like this. Now here we are going to write now a of r dot length, I'll be writing C++. So this is for the columns. Okay, so you'll be writing the a nested loop, will be writing it for the double dimension array. For a single dimension array, simple loop will be using it. For a double dimension array, we'll be using a nested loop, will be using it. Okay, let's see the example part here. So yesterday we are talking about, now let us say I want to read the data for 6 students, okay, or 7 students, whatever the number of students are. Now for that number of students, I want to read the marks in three subjects I want to read. Okay, now I want to store the marks of the student of, okay, let us say I'll just restrict myself to 3 students. Okay, I want to show the marks of 3 students, and okay, let's say 4 subjects for each student. Then how I'm going to declare an array? So I'll be writing int, okay, double box bracket. Then I'll just use a variable called mrks is equal to new, okay, int of, for how many students we wanted? For 3 students, and for each student I want to have 4 subjects. So 3 by 4 I'm declaring a matrix. So this matrix will help me to store the marks of 3 students, and for each student will take 4 subjects it's going to take. Okay, so I want to write a program for this. Okay, let's see this. So first I want to give a message to the user to type the student marks. So I'm just giving a message student marks. So I'm writing a loop, outer loop I'll be writing it. So for, okay, row, either you call it as row variable, whatever variable you want it, you can have some variable name. So to have these things, I'll take the variable called s. So where I'm taking the s is a variable which is representing the student. So 1, 2, 3, 4 like that. S1, S2, S3. I'll start with 0. So where s is less than. So what is the variable I'm using? Marks I'm using. So marks dot length semicolon s plus plus. I'm just opening the flower brace. So far, now I'll just take another variable called m. So where m is a variable which is representing for me for the marks for me. Okay. So where m is less than s of, sorry, marks of s I will be taking. So marks is my array. So marks of s means it will take me the row number. S value is going to start with 0. So marks of 0 it is going to take me the first row. Marks of 1 it takes me second row. Marks of 3 it's going to take me the fourth row. Like that, what will happen? So each and every time the value of s is going to change for me. So it takes the row and then it takes the length of it. Okay. So it's m is less than marks of s dot length. See here I'm not writing the, I'm not defining the length there. 3 or 4 I'm not defining it. I'm asking you to take it automatically based upon what the declarations you have made there. So this is m plus plus. Okay, this is a loop for the student marks. Okay, so this is the repetition for each student marks. Okay, now I want to give a message to the user, type the marks now. So before I say type the marks, so first I'll give a message, so student number. Okay, I'll just call this out. Okay, so enter data for student. I'll print the value of the student. So that is, I'll take the variable called s. So it prints me s value 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 like that. It's going to print for me. Then I want to read the marks now. So enter marks in which subject it is. Okay, in subject. I'll do one thing. I'll just place the value of the variable m outside my double quotes. So when I'm placing it outside double quotes, what happens? It replaces the variable m with the value there, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 like that. M subject. Okay. So I'm just entering the data to separate between those two. I'll just use a colon symbol. I'm using it. Now I'm supposed to use the scanner class so that I read the data from the user. So for that purpose, I'm calling the scanner object from sc is equal to new scanner class. Okay. So for the scanner class, I'm writing system, I'm passing the system.in as the argument for it. Okay. So we are telling from where the data has to be read. It has to read the data from the keyboard. So I'm passing system.in as the argument. I want to store the marks there. So mrks marks of s of m is equal to sc object dot. So I want to read the integer value. I'll call the method next int method. I'm calling it to read the integer value. So this is going to read me the data for the students now. That is the marks it's going to read. So this is the loop for reading the. This is a loop for reading the data for me. Okay, now so I want to print the data. So I'll just write a loop for printing the data. Okay, so while I'm going to print the data, I'll use the same kind of loop. I'll be using it same double dimensional, sorry, nested loop will be using it. I'll just copy this, Control C, Control V I have used. Okay, so here I don't want to print, read the data, I don't want to do it. So I'm just removing this. So here also I don't want to read. Okay, I want to print the data onto the screen. So if I want to print it onto screen, then I'll call my system.out, system.out.println, then mrks of values I want to print of s and m, it's going to print for me. And let's run it and check. Okay, for time being, what I do is, instead of taking for 3 students, so only for the testing purpose, so I'm going to cut it down to 2 students that are there. I'll just run it. Now it will enter the data for student 0, it is giving me. Now enter the marks in 0 subject. Okay, I'll just give the marks. Okay, second subject. It's going to be third subject. Right, then next what will happen? It will go for the outer loop, it goes, and again it reads me the data for the second set of student data. Okay, so you see what has happened. It has printed all the student data, it has printed one below the other, it has printed. No, I don't want it. I want it to print in a proper way. So I want the data to be printed in the same line. So what I'm doing, I'm using print, instead of using println. So let's run the code and check. So now, so that is a subject number 4 for me. Now second student. Now it's going to print me the data. But what happened? The whole data is printed for me in the same line. So, but after one student data, I want to move to the next line. So before I move to the next line, so every student data, there should be some gap should be there. I want to maintain some space in between. So for that, I'm using \t, I'm using it. So where the \t is going to give me what? A space, a tab space will be there between one data and the another data. So let's see what it's going to do for me. Is it is going to give me as per my requirement or not? Fine, I got the data, but all the students data is coming for me the same line. So I want to break to the next line for the next student data. So up to this loop, it's going to print for the one student. So after completing of this student data, I want to move to the next line. So I'll call a dummy system.out.println statement I'll call. So that what will happen, it breaks me to the next line for me. Right? Okay, now we got it as per the whatever we wanted. Right? So getting it? Okay, any questions? Oh, fine. I'll share this code also. I'll share it for you. Okay, I'll just be uploading it to the Google Classroom. Yeah. So any questions are there? Okay, I'll stop the class. We'll continue on tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll be continuing by 10:30. That is after your manual testing is over. Okay. So whenever the manual testing class is going to over, just after 5 minutes, I'll start your class. Okay.